everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making a few cards using an alcohol ink background, but instead of using traditional alcohol inks, we're going to be using alcohol ink markers. I happen to have Spectra Noir markers, but you can use whatever alcohol ink markers you might have in your collection, whether that be Copics or whatever you may have. I just happen to own Spectra Noir markers. They are a much more affordable option as opposed to Copics. However, I do know that the quality of Copics is a lot higher, but I just happen to enjoy the Spectra Noirs just as well. Now the colors I'm using are JG1, which is a nice jade green, BT7, TB7, and BT5. And I'm just coloring different areas of this piece of acetate. It's actually a piece of a stamp packaging that I happen to have in my stash. I'm just coloring all over the back of that acetate, creating a different color effect with these markers. I'm going to be getting like a green to blue to like a teal background with these colors. I'm going to be using a pipette, which is kind of like an eyedropper. I get mine from Michael's. They're very inexpensive. You could probably just use an eyedropper as well if that's what you have. And I'm just putting some rubbing alcohol all over my background that I created with my markers. And I'm picking up that ink, that rubbing alcohol mixed with the ink, with a piece of photo paper. I'm just going to add a little bit more rubbing alcohol and pick up those dabs of ink. And you can see how it created this really neat effect on this piece of photo paper. I'm just going to be adding the rubbing alcohol with the pipette directly to the photo paper and kind of move that color around. Now I'm going to flip over my piece of acetate here, and I'm going to do the same process with the markers, coloring on the back of that sheet and adding color all around. And then I'm going to be picking up some rubbing alcohol with my pipette as well, again. And this time I'm using a piece of Ranger gloss paper. Now this paper, this cardstock, is really well known for use with alcohol inks. However, I want to show you the difference between doing this technique using the photo paper as opposed to the Ranger gloss paper. Now you can see how well those colors blend on the Ranger paper. However, I'm looking for a more intense, vibrant look that I'm getting from the photo paper as opposed to the Ranger cardstock. They both have beautiful looks to them, but I'm looking for something a little bit more bright and vibrant. So I'm going to do another layer. The alcohol background does not take very long to dry at all. So I'm going to be coloring all over the acetate again, dropping on my rubbing alcohol with the pipette, picking up that ink with my photo paper, and getting a second layer look. And I just think this turned out absolutely beautiful. Now I have all this ink, and I was going to wipe it away with a baby wipe, but I decided I should pick it up with a spare piece of photo paper so I can get a third background, and I'm not to waste any of that ink. So I'm just adding a little bit more rubbing alcohol so I can pick up some of that ink, and then I'll wipe off the excess with the baby wipe. So I'll flip over my acetate sheet again, and I'll add some more color to it like I've done before, and we're going to go back to that Ranger glossy cardstock. Add some rubbing alcohol, and I'll pick up that Ranger glossy cardstock and get a second layer again. Now the difference between the photo paper I'm going to be showing you, the photo paper can hold, it's meant to hold a lot of ink when running through a photo machine. So you're going to notice I get a little bit more warping with the glossy cardstock because it has a cardstock back to it, which normally is not a problem because as it dries it will straighten out. So I'm just going to show you the difference there. The top left is the photo paper, the top right is the glossy cardstock, and then the bottom left is that extra piece of photo paper that I used to pick up the excess ink. Now you can see some of that around the edge. The cardstock is soaking up that ink, and it's getting a little bit of a haze around the edge. It's not a terrible look, it's just not the look I was going for. And I added a little bit more rubbing alcohol to the photo paper just to get the colors to mix a little bit more, and I did the same on the glossy cardstock, just to move the colors around. So I'm just going to show you the colors that I used from my Spectra Noirs, and I really prefer the look of the photo paper. Now there's a spare piece that I used. Now I'm going to get some questions. People are going to ask, what happens if you color directly on the photo paper? Well, you can see that's what I did here, and I added some alcohol, and it does kind of work, but the paper where you draw the markers doesn't move that much, and so I get a lot of streaking there. So I don't really like the look of that. I prefer the dropping onto the acetate. So here is some sentiments that I used. I don't know what happened to my footage. I had filmed me making these vellum sentiment strips, but I don't know what happened to the footage. But I just used some white embossing powder and black embossing powder to emboss some sentiments on some vellum. Now I'm just going to show you on the one on the left is actually used with black ink and clear embossing powder, and the one on the right is used with black ink and black embossing powder. So I just wanted to show you get a lot more intensity when using black embossing powder. However, a lot of people don't like using black embossing powder because it is quite messy. So I've just cut these strips down. Again, I don't know what happened to the film, to the footage that I filmed showing me cutting these panels down, but I've cut them down to about 4 by 5.5 to fit on an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 when folded. And I'm just going to put these, adhere them down with my adhesive. I use a dot liner adhesive. And I forgot I wanted to add my sentiment strips onto my panels before adhering them to the card. So I'm just going to peel it up a little bit. This adhesive, when not pushed down very hard, is a little bit temporary until you push it down firmly. I'm going to add a little bit more adhesive there. So I was able to lift up the panel pretty easily and add my sentiment. I'm going to do the same to all 3 cards. I'm just adding some multi-medium matte here behind the sentiment. Now you want to try and hide this glue. Even though it does dry clear and matte, when using adhesive on vellum, vellum tends to show any kind of adhesive that you put behind it. So it's a nice opportunity to be able to hide the glue behind your sentiments, and this will help that stay nice and flat. I'm just using a flat surface like my ink pad to push that onto the card so it can dry. So you can see I got a little bit of glue seepage outside of that sentiment, and you can see it a little bit, but it isn't too bad. I'm adding some more dot liner adhesive to the bottom of my vellum panel, and I'll just fold that over and then push it down firmly to get it to adhere nice and firm. So I did the same to all 3. I'm just showing you. These 2 I did remember to put the glue behind the sentiment. This one I didn't, and I just wanted to show you. It's not a big deal, but you can see that there is a little bit of dimension between the card and that vellum. If you want to avoid that, you can add that glue behind the sentiment like I did with the other 2 cards. I just picked out a bunch of flowers from my collection. These are Recollections flowers, and I'm just adhering them with some, adhering them together with some glue dots. And before I adhere them to the card, I'm taking a black liner pen and I'm just adding some stitching lines down the sides of my card just for a little bit more interest. So now I'm going to be adhering my flowers that I put together with some glue dots, and I just happen to use just the regular glue dots brand that I get from my local Michaels. And I'm placing them right on the packaging and then lifting up the glue dots with the flowers. I'm just trying to decide where to place them on my card. If you've watched my videos in the past, you'll know that I love to add dimension to my cards using Tonic Nouveau Crystal Drops. I'm going to be using this ebony black and this gloss white to add some little drops. They're almost like enamel dots to my card, and I'll be adding little drops all around the card. These take about 12 to 24 hours to dry. I usually just leave them overnight to set, and that way I know they're really nice and dry. And at this card I'm using the ebony black. And when I'm done with my bottle, I actually like to tap the bottom and squeeze out the nozzle just so I don't get any crystal drops clogging the nozzle. So there we have it. There's the 3 cards that we made. The one on the left is actually using that spare piece of photo paper that we used to pick up the excess ink that was left on our acetate. The one in the center is the gloss cardstock from Ranger. And the one on the right is the photo paper that we used in the beginning of the video. So I really like how they turned out. It's interesting how the one in the middle kind of got like a purpley periwinkle tint to it, and that was using the Ranger gloss paper. Thank you so much for watching, and please hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.